Hey guys, what is up? This is Kazi from cleverprogrammer.com and you are watching Codecademy Python tutorial 17. Alright, cool. Get excited because just to show you where we're at, I'm sure you already know and you're just waiting for this part, but we're at about 50 something percent, and we are currently at Battleship. Now, just a little bit of an aside, something really, well, not really, but a little sad happened. So I recorded this video. That's why we're at 36% of Battleship. I recorded that video. It was about 30 minutes long. However, it got deleted. So we're just going to go through it again, all right? But I'm just going to focus on making it even better this time. So you guys are going to get the best of everything. So just ignore the 36%, imagine that it's 0%. So we're gonna go to part 1. You see all those tick marks? Ignore those. We're gonna start from part 1, okay? Welcome to Battleship, because that's where you guys are, and I care more about that rather than where I am at, okay? So in this project, we will build a game called Battleship. How does this game work? Well, this game works very simply. It's basically like a 5x5 grid, and you gotta hide your ship somewhere, and then other people try to shoot at it, and if they guess correct, they get to hit and sink your ship, okay? Just in case you've never played it. So let me show you an example of it on the board. So I've already copied this from my previous video, and we're gonna demonstrate a board, a 5x5 board, using a Python list within lists, okay? So this is a big list that contains these 5 rows here, okay? So this is representing kind of like a 5x5. How this list looks in reality is like this, just so you guys are not confused. It's actually like this, okay? There are no spaces anywhere. It's like you can even assign it to a variable. But I want to make it look nice and look in that way, because it's hard to read otherwise what's going on, okay? For human beings, not for computers. For computers, it's still the same thing. And effectively, let's say I hid my ship at row 3, right? This is, let's say, row 2, because this is row 0, and let's say this is row 1, and this is row 2, and this is column 2. This is column 0, column 1, and column 2. So let's say I hid my ship in row 2, column 2. You would go here, and let's say you took a guess, and you guessed that I had my ship here, and you hit that spot. You probably have 10 guesses or something like that. Oh, actually, it says right here, the player will have 10 guesses to try to sink the ship. And if you guess that spot, then you get to hit my ship and sink it. But I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to try to hide my ship really well. I'm okay at this game. Not really, I suck. Okay, so to build this game, we will use our knowledge of lists. Right here, I'm reading. Conditionals and functions in Python. Basically, what they're showing you is, hey, with what we've learned so far, we're going to use that to create something more powerful, something really good. So that's why we're working on a project. We're effectively taking the knowledge that we have and putting it to some use, a practical thing, so to speak, okay? All right, so I'm going to save and submit and start next lesson. Okay, getting our feet wet. The first thing we need to do is to set up the game board. So initially it was like that. The only reason you saw it completed was because I've completed it earlier. So what I'm going to do is hit reset code. And simply it says create a variable board and set it to equal an empty list. So what I alluded to earlier, in this part right here, welcome to Battleship, so right before this, what I alluded to was a board, right, that has 5x5. So that's effectively what we're going to be doing. So board, but initially we started off with an empty list. Start next lesson. Now it says make a list. What is this part over here, right? What is this showing me? Well, all this does is it puts together a list with just, let's say you have 1 O. Well, it'll just make a list with 5 O's, okay? You see that right here? Makes a list with 5 O's. So what we want is we want to create a board If we want to create a grid, we need this to happen 5 times. So we need to create 5 different lists with O's in them, and store that in a list of lists. Okay. So for example, it should kind of look like this, but we need all of this to be one thing and tied together. So we need to put all of this in just one list. Okay, effectively. We're gonna see how we do that. They're gonna show us. So I'm gonna say save and okay. So here, create a 5x5 grid. What they're doing here is just that. So let's paste this code. Let's run it, and let's do print board. Okay. So what's going on here? Oh, I'm sorry. We have to reset this code. But here's how I went about it. Okay, I'm gonna do this live. Now I don't care about this variable. I'm not gonna use it, so I'm just gonna name it underscore. You can name it you can name it whatever you want. But if there's ever a time I'm not using the looping variable, I write an underscore, and that's how you're supposed to do it according to Python conventions, or the PEP8. That's something you guys are gonna learn about later. There's a whole thing on styling your code. So right now, just focus on writing code, but later you want to focus on how to write clean code that other people can read, and it's easy to understand even for yourself when you come back later, rather than a bunch of junk. For example, sure, you can say a is equal to 5 and x is equal to 5 on the same line, but that's annoying to read, and no Pythonists will like this, and they'll yell at you for it. So much better is just that. It's easier to read. Okay. So I'm going to do for blank in range, and I'm going to do range of 5. So I want this loop to run 5 times, right? Range 0 to 5 will effectively create that list up to 5, but not including 5. This is the reason why we'll loop through 5 times. This underscore is going to be 0 the first time, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. You get the idea. But we're not going to be using that underscore. That's why I named it underscore. And I'm going to say print O times 5. Okay. Well, what is this going to do? You're going to see. I'm sorry, actually. Yep. So you see that right there? It just printed it out and making it O every time, right? So let's go back to how the code was, and all I did was just that, except I added an append to it. All right, so all they want us to do is use range to loop. Okay, so I'm going to use range to loop from 0 to 5, and I'll simply say that to board, right, append that. So now we're going to have a list containing 5 lists inside of it. Okay, because remember, this creates a list. So we're going to keep going through the loop and creating lists inside of that. And you effectively have that board that we were talking about. How did this work? Well, underscore was 0 the first time. And then we came down here, not like we need this 0 at all. And we just simply appended this list right there to the board, like that. Then we looped again, and underscore was 1 next time. And then we appended this list right over here to the board. Then we looped through it again, and then we simply appended, right? This part evaluates to this part evaluates to this, and we simply appended that to the board. And effectively what ends up happening at the end of it is that board is equal to, let me just make it clear. Whoops. Okay. Ultimately, board is equal to this thing that we were talking about earlier, and this just showed us how to create a 5x5 board like that. Okay, so this thing here is the same thing, right? That thing up there above my head in the terminal right here is the same as what the board is. I just spaced it out nicer, so as a human being, you could synthesize that information in an easier way and just tell right off the bat that's 5 rows, rather than really squinting your eyes here and going, okay, there's a comma right here, so this whole part is the first element, this whole part is the second element, this whole part is the third element, and so on and so forth. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So we're gonna simply, I think, copy paste the code, and that should be good enough. And then we should just print, I don't know if we have to print board. Inside the loop, use append a list containing 5 zeros to board, just like in the example above. Note that it's O's, not zeros, so actually it's an O, and I do have an O. I just said 0 for no reason. And we'll just print it for fun to see what it looks like, okay? Right there. Start next. Check it twice. So again, I'm gonna reset the code. Use the print command to display the contents of the board. Okay. Great job. Now that we have built our board, let's show it off. Throughout our game, we'll want to print the game board so the player can see which locations that they have already guessed. Regularly printing the board will help us debug our program. So when we're creating this program, constantly printing out the board will help us identify if there are potentially any errors or if we're messing up with our logic somewhere, right? It'll visually just show us. However, the easiest way to print the board would be to have Python display it for us using the print command. Let's give that a try and see what the results look like. Is this a useful way to print our board for Battleships? So when we create a board using this algorithm right here, the simple loop that keeps appending lists of O's to the board and essentially creating 5 rows. Let's look at it. Does this look nice? Heck no. It looks hideous, right? It looks really, really bad. You have to squint your eyes to see the commas, to see the rows, where anything is. And if you were playing a game here, nobody would want to play your game. If you were showing this to your friends, they would not be your friends anymore. Bad things would happen, right? Your family would be like, we don't like this guy anymore. So you want to make it in a way so it is easy on the eyes, right? Your friends have fun when they're trying this out. And even you yourself could have fun and be proud of showing them something cool. So let's go back here and let's try to make this better. So when it prints it out, it does not look like this. It looks a lot better. All right, so let's go save and submit code, and let's start next lesson. And I'm simply gonna reset the code. Okay. So now we're gonna create custom print. Now we can see the contents of our list, but clearly it would be easier to play the game if we could print the board out like a grid with each row on its own line. First, delete your print statement. That's what it tells us to do. Then define a function named print board, and with a single argument board. Inside the function, write a for loop that iterates through each row and print that out to the screen. Call your function on board. Okay, just like that. Let's take it and try it out and let's see what happens. All right, so how did this happen? We got 5 rows and we didn't get the outer list. We just got the 5 inner rows. How did that happen? Let's talk about it really quickly. Here we created the board. You already know how we did that. Here we already created this thing that gives us essentially that. Okay, so this loop alone creates all of that. But how did we do it so we printed it out really nicely? Well, let me show you. So this was board, right? That's what we created. Whoops. That's what we created. And what happened was where board was, we got that part right there, right? So we basically passed that board to our function call right here. Now it went to the definition of the function with the same board. And what does that function tell us to do? Well, that function tells us that for each row in there, right? So what is row? Let's actually bring that up so it's a little bit easier to read what's going on. Still not really easy, but so what is happening? right, we have that board right there, and we have that board right here. So the first time we go through the loop, the row is actually this thing here. And then we say print that, and it outputs this row right over here, okay? Then the next time we go through the loop, row is simply this row out of that list. So row becomes that guy, and we say print that guy, and that's how you get the second row, okay? I'm gonna remove that giant board because it's confusing. So I'm gonna just step you through it. Then the third time we go through, remember, it's this board that we passed into our function. Row iterates over this list, and the next time it's the third element in the list, then row is the fourth element, and then finally row is the fifth element in that list, and it prints it out line by line. This way you don't get to see the outer list. Kind of cool. And let's save and submit, and we got each row. Cool. Let's start next lesson. Now, printing pretty. We're getting pretty close to a playable board, but wouldn't it be nice to get rid of those quote marks and commas? We're storing our data as a list, but the player doesn't need to know that. And check that out. Isn't that amazing? Right over here, look what they're showing you. This is exactly what I was showing you guys in the last video. So you can call me Mystic Mac because I predict these things, right? That's what Conor McGregor would say. So, you know, I'll take credit where it's due. So, yeah, that feels pretty good. We were trying this part out right here earlier, right? And they're showing us this now. So you're gonna see how this is useful. And literally it was these examples that I was showing as well. One was with an empty space in between, and then another one I showed was with 4 hyphens, but they have 3 hyphens here. And I was talking about creating a game and showing it nice. And here they are creating battleships and showing it nice, okay? I didn't check this earlier, but I am going through it now, and I saw that they have it. So let's keep going through it. Okay, how does this work? Well, we have this list A, B, C, D. If we call this join weird thing, if we call join with that space on this list letters, well, what it does is it gives you back A space B space C space D. It joined every letter with a space in between. That's what this is saying. Hey, join every letter in the list with the space in between. That's the space in between. And this part is saying join every letter with 3 hyphens in between. Whereas, so you can see A, 3 hyphens, B, 3 hyphens, C, and 3 hyphens, and D. So we want to turn each row into O and nothing else, okay? Simple. Let's go in here and let's try board of 0, right? If we did board of 0, what will we get? We should get back the first element in the board, which is that guy right there. What was the error? List indices must be integers or slices, not tuple. What is it saying? Oh, we didn't put commas here, right? So that's what. Here we go. So the 0th element will give you that guy. The first element will give you that guy. Second element will give you that guy. So, okay. Now, let's call dot join on that list. So all those O's are together. All those O's are together. If I called join on the entire board, you'll get an error. Because you can put strings together, but you can't put lists together, right? You're passing it the entire board. So what it's trying to do is put all of these guys together, separated by a space. That doesn't make sense. It's trying to do this. Like literally all these guys with the space. That makes no sense. What is that thing? I don't know. So it's not a string, so you can't do arbitrary operations to that. Okay, so we are gonna essentially do the same thing. So for 0, we're gonna join it by spaces. And then for 1, we're gonna join it by spaces. And for 2, we're gonna join it by spaces. And for 3, we're gonna join it by spaces, and so on and so forth. All right, let's do just that. For row in board, for let's see, I'm getting each row, and for, I can say numbers in row, I can say join numbers, say print, and let's run it. Let's see what happens. Okay, is that what we wanted? No. So let's go back and debug and let's see what happens. So for row and board, let's first print row. Let's take it one step at a time instead of doing 2 loops right away. So you can see that we get these guys right over here. So we're getting 1 row at a time. Well, let's try this. Let's do dot join on that row. Let's try that. Let's see what happens. And there we go. Right? We got the row, and then we just simply joined each row. And that's it. And then we just looped through and did that for every single list in the list board. This is called a 2-dimensional array. It's a little advanced concept, but you guys are getting access to it right now. That's called a grid, and that's a 2D array or a 2D list. Okay, array in other languages, it just means a list in Python. Okay, so that is why it's called 2D, is because you have lists within lists, and for another reason that I'll show you, that you can access things by row and column. Okay, for instance, if you wanted to access that X right there, right, how would you do it? You would see what row it's in. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and what column it's in. So you'd go 0, 1, 2, 3. It's in 3rd row and 3rd column. And the basic idea is row, comma, column will give you the item you are looking for in a 2D list. Okay? Or a grid. Okay, this is an important note. Write it down, or write it down by hand, or write it down in your Evernote or whatever thing you use, because that's important. So for example, I can do board of 3 row and 3 column, and I can print it out, and you will see that I get back that X, right? This X right there. So if I comment out these guys, and if I change that X to something else, you can see that I get that something else. Okay, how does that work? Well, board 3, this row will get me this entire list. And now inside of this entire list, I have to access the 0, 1, 2, 3rd index. So, right, this essentially, that whole thing is this right here. And to get hidden from that, I just have to do 3. Okay, so I can just do that right here. They're equivalent. Okay, all right, cool. All right, so let's try that. Okay, we should just do that to our function. Okay, so we're gonna go in here and go in here and just do that to our function. Cool. So now we get a nice board, and remember, we don't need to show the person, right? It says here, we're storing our data as a list, but the player doesn't need to know that. Remember, the player doesn't need to know that you're storing it as a list. You want to show it to them in a nice, user-friendly way. Imagine if on your iPhone, every time you had to put a number in, you saw some kind of dictionary. You don't see any dictionary in here, right? Even though when you're storing numbers in your iPhone, it's storing it in a dictionary like a key value pair, but you don't see a squiggly, and then only after that squiggly you can put your name, right? Just to recall, dictionaries work like this, key comma value. So it's not like you have to write your name exactly right here and then put it as a string, right? You, as a matter of fact, don't even know what's going on in the back end, and you just get to do stuff from a nice user interface, and then on the back end it knows it's a dictionary, and on the back end it knows it's a list. Same idea is working here effectively, okay? We are creating a list for the back end, but your user doesn't need to know that, and it doesn't look boring and annoying to the user anymore. It looks nice. It looks easy. It's easy on the eyes. I see the 5x5. Really cool. Okay, let's start next lesson. Reset code, and let's check out what they're talking about here. So they're talking about random. That's awesome. Again, same thing is going on here, right? From random import randint. Again, you guys, from import, that import magical command. Again, these people, right? They were staying up late at night, eating ramen noodle, writing this code, right? They probably lost friends while they were working on these giant projects, and they, you know, their relationships got destroyed. But they gave all those sacrifices for us. And if we don't understand this import command, we're letting all of these amazing, brilliant coders' sacrifices go in vain, you guys. So understand how import works, because import will change your life. And why it's so important is you're getting to use geniuses' code, right? People who are really smart and wrote brilliant code and wrote these really useful libraries. You get to just say import, and now you can use all of their code without having to know how that code works. Cool? So effectively what we're doing here is that from random module, we're importing a function called randint, which is random integer. What it does is you give it a range, and it's inclusive on both ends, and it picks a point. What does that mean? If you give it 0 and 1, it could pick 0 and it could pick 1. Both, okay? It's not that it goes up to but not including the 1, like how we're used to in a lot of Python things. So just to show you how this works, again, I could use REPL it to show you, but I also want to use other things so you know that you can use multiple things for this. And I have examples up there, but I'll show you right down here. From random import randint, and effectively I can do randint 0 to 6, and I can keep running it. Yeah, and you see that you got 6 indeed, and you got 0, and you got numbers in between. You got 2, 2, 1, 1, 4. Every time you get, it generates a number randomly. Whoops. So it could be the same number, or it could be a different number. Okay, it's random. It's pretty random. So why is that important? Well, check it out. That's what we're gonna use, right? This says hide. Excellent. Now let's hide our battleship in a random location on the board. Since we have a two-dimensional list, remember we talked about the 2D list right before this? We'll use two variables to store the ship's location. Ship row and ship column. You remember I showed you? List, row, column. That's the trick we're going to use to store our hidden variable. So let's say that we had that board that we created earlier, right, a few times. This board right here. Ooh, not X's. I want all of those to be strings. So let's somehow bring that code back that generates that board. Okay, so that creates the board. I don't need this for now. Print board. Okay. All right. So what did we do? We imported the random randint function from random module, and we initialized board to be an empty list. Then we went ahead and constructed the board, which is the 5x5 grid with 5 O's in each row. And now we're just gonna print out that board. So you can see that right over here. This is a 5x5 grid, just trust me, and I've already shown you multiple times. So, well, what we wanna do is we wanna be able to place our hidden item in there, or let the computer pick a hidden item in there, and then we have to guess where it is, okay? So how do we do that? Well, check it out. What I can do is I can place hidden item and then print board after that, and you'll see the difference between the two boards, okay? I'm gonna do new line, so it separates it out, and now I will do board of row 2 and column 3, and I'm gonna set it equal to hidden. So the O in row 2 is right here, and column 3 is right over here. It's gonna set this right here to hidden, the word hidden, and you're gonna see the difference. So that's the top board, right? This is line 10, printing out the board that we constructed, the regular board. This prints out two new lines. That's why there's a little segregation there. And then this part here prints out the board, and you can see 2, 3 is actually hidden. Well, these numbers that are generated by ourselves here, 2 and 3, we need these to be generated randomly, okay? So we're gonna use, effectively what we can do is use randint here directly to generate a number between 0 and 4, and including 0 and 4. This means that it generates 5 numbers, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 numbers. If you put 5 here, that would be wrong, because you can't possibly go to row 6. You understand? Because we start from row 0 when we're indexing. So we can do that here, and we can do randint of 0, 4 here as well. Well, each time this is going to be generating some number from 0 to 4, and each time this is going to be generating a number between 0 and 4. So let's check it out now. Hidden is going to be in a different position every time, right? Hidden is here. Now hidden is here. Now let's check where hidden is. Hidden is right over here. Okay, but to make this code a little bit cleaner, what we're gonna do is we're gonna assign those variables. Okay, so I'm gonna say random row equals randint 0, 4, and I'm gonna say random column is equal to randint 0, 4. And here I'm simply gonna say a random row, and here I'm simply gonna say random column. Okay, and every time I print it out, you can see that hidden right here is in a different location effectively every time. So you want the computer to be automatically able to pick where hidden is, so when you're playing and you guess that location, you can sink the ship. So we're not gonna have it actually say hidden, because then obviously you know where it is, but I'm just showing you for now how random works and how changing things in a 2D list works. Okay, so all of that is great, but what if the board is a different size? It's not a 5x5 grid, it's a 6x6 grid or whatever. How do you know instead of 4 what to put there? Well, how are we getting this 4, and how can we programmatically get it every time? We'll just get the length of what the board is, right? And this should give you 5, because there are 5 elements in the list board, right? Element 1, element 2, element 3, element 4, and element 5. So length of board should evaluate to 5. But remember, putting 5 here would be incorrect, and the reason is because now randint is giving you numbers from 0 to 5, including 0 and 5, and that's 6 total options, and you can never go to row 6 or column 6 for that matter. So what we're going to do is len board minus 1 and len board minus 1, right? And this should give us what we want effectively. Okay, every time you'll see hidden changing every time, right? Hidden is changing. Cool. Let's go back. Define 2 new functions, random row and random col, that each take board as input. Okay, they just want us to define it as a function. So random row board and return random integer between 0 and len of board minus 1, and effectively random col board that takes in board and returns random integer between 0 and len of board minus 1. Okay, that's where they got len of board minus 1. Call each function on board. So now we're going to call each function on board, and we're going to say random. I was just reading just in case I missed anything in their instructions, but it doesn't look like it. Random row, pass it the board that we created. This is the board that we created up here, okay? These 4 lines effectively, or 3 lines of code, construct the entire board for the game. And I'm gonna do that. I need 1 parenthesis. Okay, cool. And we can see what this is doing. Join, print, right? Here we gotta make sure that we do print. So what is that effectively doing? These functions just return an integer. Okay, if you give them board, they just return an integer. So we give it a board. We give it that 5x5 grid, each containing 5, each list containing 5 O's, strings. And then what it does is it takes that board, it returns its length minus 1, which in this case would be 0 to 4, and that simply evaluates to some random integer, like let's say 2. And so this part might just evaluate to 2, and this part might evaluate to some number like 0 for column, and it might be some 0th column, and that way we have our random row and our random column, and then we can later use it for whatever reason. Okay, so for this part, I'm gonna stop it right here, and we're gonna continue in our next video. So please, if you haven't yet, please subscribe, like the video, or if you could please share it with whoever you know, or maybe don't share it. That's maybe your secret of getting better at programming. Whatever the case may be, this is Kazi from cleverprogrammer.com. You just finished watching part 17. I will see you in Codecademy Python tutorial part 18.